Hi. Hello. In soccer, we trust you too, family. In honor of us doing our very best, as always, to make you all feel a little bit more in the know about the U.S. men's national team and our biggest rivals and our World Cup group, we want you to hit that like and subscribe button. We feel like that's a fair trade for bringing you the goods 3 days a week. Anyway, today we're talking about our midfields and who we should call in for these 4 big games, but more specifically, who should we start now just in June, not necessarily for the World Cup, so don't start yelling at us now. And we're also going to talk about if the English are a little bit too arrogant. So let's do this. Yes. What is up, everyone? And welcome to another exciting installment of In Soccer We Trust. I'm Jimmy Conrad alongside my former U.S. men's national team teammates, Charlie Chuck Wagon Davies and Hollywood Heath Pearson. After a great interview with Mexican international Hector Moreno yesterday, we are focusing back on our squad, specifically the midfield, and who we want to see in these upcoming games as we continue to fine-tune who we want to bring to Qatar. Also, earlier this week, I had a chance to speak with Inter Miami's manager and ex-England international Phil Neville about England's chances against the U.S., and apparently Jamie Carragher and Micah Richards also chimed in on what they thought the score would be as well, and we have proof. And we're going to roll those clips in a little bit, but first I want to say hello to these handsome gentlemen with me. Heath, how are you doing, man?
Good eye, mate.
Good eye. How's life? You okay?
Oh yeah, I'm doing good.
I thought
honestly,
you would extrapolate there, but
I mean your intro. We might have to go back and redo it just because I laughed about 2 seconds in while you were saying something. But I thought it was great.
It was great.
I thought you set the tone really early on.
That's what I do.
But I'm good. You know, I'm really good. I'm excited about this conversation. I've heard some rumors between the three of us that there may be some differences in our midfield. So I'm excited to discuss it and explain why I'm the smartest one out of the three of us.
Oh, here we go. Charlie, great to see you as always.
Always.
You know, midfield stuff. I know that you're more of an attacking guy. I'm sure you're looking forward to getting into our front three at some point. But we got to, games are won or lost in midfield. I have it written on the sign behind me if you can see us here on the YouTubes. If you can't, well, you got to come over to YouTube and hit subscribe.
I thought you defender union. You're always like, hey.
No, defenders win championships. Yeah. Games are won or lost in the midfield.
Thank you, Heath. Games are won or lost in the midfield.
Defense wins championships.
Defense wins championships. That's exactly right. So how are you feeling about this midfield conversation, Charlie?
I love it. I mean, we've gotten a good chance to see that the players who potentially are going to be running the midfield for the U.S. And it's the strongest part of the team. If you're looking at this group, the most depth and the most talent is in the midfield. That's without a doubt. So in trying to build this lineup, it's also difficult because you think if it is your strongest part of the team, maybe you want to get more than 3 of them out. And I think that's ultimately what may have to happen. I know they've been in a 4-3-3 since the beginning with Gregg Berhalter, but ultimately you have to play to your strengths. And so if you're trying to figure out how many players can you fit on the pitch, the majority has to be from the midfield.
So one of my concerns as I was building this, and I did the assignment
is wrong. Jimmy, is Charlie on the run?
I don't know.
Why are you always somewhere different, Charlie? Who are you hiding from? What is it?
I don't know.
What is it? He used to run like this on the pitch too, just always running everywhere.
Have to.
And he looks really nice, by the way. Like he's running for mayor of Boston at some point. But what I want to say is that when I was putting this assignment together, I thought it was just the collection of players we wanted to bring to these June friendlies and, of course, the Nations League game. So I actually sent over a list of 8s because I thought, all right, if we're gonna have a 26-man roster. But here's my issue, Heath. When I started to think about this, and I hadn't thought about it before, the injuries to Weston, McKennie, and Gio Reyna, I think, are quite significant because we only have 6 games together as a group before we go to Qatar and play. And either we're missing those guys to continue to establish more rapport and more chemistry if we want to go with Musah, McKennie, Adams, which is, I think, the 3 that we want in central midfield heading into the World Cup. But we miss out on the opportunity of potentially putting Gio Reyna there and dropping Yunus Musah entirely or putting him out on the wing because Yunus Musah can do that, does it for Valencia at times. And we can't even tinker and try maybe a half against Granada, or we don't even have that opportunity because these guys are hurt. And I don't think I took those injuries into consideration at the time because I thought, oh, whatever, they got 6 months to heal as long as they're ready for the World Cup, which is still true and the most important thing. But I feel like we're missing on potentially tinkering, to Charlie's point, and maybe giving a different look to our midfield based on an opponent. Maybe we need to go chase the game and get after it with Iran. Do we need Do we need Musah out there too, or can we bring on another attack minder? Can we bring in Gio Reyna or Brendan Aronson? These are the questions I'm thinking about that I don't think I had been put up against the wall and said, give me your midfield until I got this assignment. And then, of course, I didn't pick my 3 starters. But I think on my list, I put the top 3 that I thought would be in there. But go ahead, Heath.
But so haven't we sort of been working through that through all of qualifying? Like, I feel like we're pretty close to our best 11 outside of Charlie's failure to develop a striker. But like in terms of our midfield,
who's our goalkeeper? You don't know. Who's our center back?
I don't know, but the midfield is probably the closest, and our back line, right? There's some, in terms of whatever, like we know that McKennie's a starter on the national team, but if he's not available, now you have an opportunity to see. I guess the question I'm getting to is this an opportunity to see who
available for June?
Well, he could be possibly available, yeah, but
I think he will be.
Okay,
so that would be nice if he is.
It'd be amazing. But is this an opportunity to, Hector Moreno had a great point where he was like, it's really late to start bringing somebody in who hasn't been in, when he talked about how he'd been on the national team for a year and a half, but only getting a game, once per year for 3 years before he went to the World Cup. And I guess the question I'm saying is, with your midfield or any players, is it an opportunity to get a last look at, can this guy do it for me? Or is it an opportunity to say, can this guy be an alternative option in my starting 11, like my first 13, 14 players? Or is this a on the bus, off the bus, type of, or on the plane, off the plane type of scenario where it's like kind of going through final cuts? Because when I was competing in 2010, I was trying to get a last look to prove myself.
Yeah, of course. You need those minutes, man.
And I need any game that I got. I remember in 2010, I was set to get subbed off against somebody in Tampa, and I whipped the ball in. Brian Ching put it away, and they let me stay on the field for the rest of the game. I believe that got me to the next thing, which was Holland, the Holland game, and then into the final camp. Maybe that was always part of the plan, but at least for me, it was like any minute that I could stay on longer. That 30 minutes extra that I got was a chance to like show something. And there was a rotation of players at that point. Obviously, it's a different World Cup. There's less lead up and all that thing. So I guess I'm just curious as to like looking at these games. You want your best 11, but if not, if you don't have your best 11, what are you looking to get out of the next players?
Okay. Let me give you my list of 8, and then Charlie, I'm going to throw it to you.
Jeez,
as to
Jimmy.
No, but just pick. I mean, you got Tyler Adams, Yunus Musah, Luca de la Torre, Kellen Acosta. I think those 4 will get called in for sure. And then I think it gets a little gray as to, okay, maybe Georgi Mihailovic, but to Hector Moreno's point, is it worth, and to your point as well, is it worth bringing them in are they gonna scrape in at this point? Now, if we expand the rosters or the World Cup or FIFA expands the rosters at 26, and I think they should, maybe one of these guys, you want to bring them in just to see if they can be that super sub or somebody that can really help the team. Georgi Mihailovic, I said, my interesting one is Gianluca Busio, because I feel like he didn't do much in qualifying to turn heads. He's had his looks. He's been in enough camps. I don't know if he's done enough, but do you give him that other opportunity, or do you go look somewhere else? You got James Sands, who just got in for Rangers in the Europa League first leg in the semifinals, 7 or 8 minutes, but enough to be trusted by Gio van Bronckhorst in big moments to be out on the field. So do you bring in James Sands? I mean, he was pretty serviceable for us in the Gold Cup, but he hasn't really been involved in qualifying. You got Tanner Tessman, who we haven't looked at all, but is getting some valuable minutes for Venezia, even though they're going to be going down and getting relegated in Serie A. When I look at that 8, Charlie, I mean, do you want to see a big midfield group? Do you want to see players get an outside chance to get some minutes, or do you want to continue to strengthen the core and find that right combination of the players we already know we have?
Well, I think we know who's going to play. And Weston McKennie's going to play 90 minutes. Tyler Adams is going to play 90 minutes, barring an injury or suspension. That's right. A given for sure. I think it's important that we think about how do you complement these players, and you got to think of training sessions. So when you do have training, and the guys that are important locker room guys, because a majority of these midfielders, as talented as they are, they're not going to play. So you got to think of, well, what are they going to do for the team? Who are the guys that everyone likes to be around? Who are the guys that keep everyone fresh and lively? So, and the ones who aren't going to complain and detract from the team if they're not getting burned. And a lot of the players are going to be playing with their club, and they're not going to play the national team in the World Cup. But are they still going to be in it? Are they still going to be involved and be good supporters? So I think Tyler Adams in June, I think Weston McKennie will start if he's back. And I think he will be, but since he's injured right now, we'll leave him out just for the
let's leave it out for now.
Yeah. So Tyler Adams, Yunus Musah, and I'm going to go with Brendan Aronson.
Whoa!
As an attacking midfielder.
Curveball.
Wow.
He's played at the 10. I mean, all with the Union, and had the most success, which got him the move to Salzburg in the first place. He's been super successful at Red Bull Salzburg. So I think this is a great time to try and incorporate him, because if you're looking at the front three, and if Christian is going to be on the left, and
do you wait really quick though? Do you feel like Aronson and Christian will get in each other's way if they start together, especially if you put Brendan?
No, not only that, but like we've had these games where Timo Weah is on the, like, why wouldn't you have tried in a game against Costa Rica away, or
and you got to think Gio Reyna too, right? So Aronson plays different than Gio Reyna, that's for sure, and Timo Weah. He moves around. I think if you brought Brendan Aronson underneath the striker, because you need Yunus Musah is not so much a connector in terms of playing underneath a 9.
Right.
I think Brendan Aronson is a little bit more aggressive with his runs, and also the balls in behind for the 9 or playing off the 9. So I think you have Aronson there, and that would force Christian to play a little bit higher up on the left side and be a little bit more isolated instead of coming inside all the time. That would work well. Plus, I think Brendan Aronson and Christian Pulisic, because they're constantly moving, they could overlap each other. They could switch sides. They could, that interchange, which also can frustrate defenses. And you talk about the movement for a team like England, for a team like Iran, whether it's Wales, Scotland, Ukraine, that might be just what the U.S. needs. A little bit more creativity in the final third and the movement interchanging, which will free up some space for the 9, whoever that may be. So I think I like Brendan Aronson. It gives the midfield a different dynamic, something, because Musah, McKennie, Adams may be a little bit different than McKennie and Musah, but they kind of move the same. They cover a lot of ground. They're deep. They play a little bit deeper in the midfield. This gives the U.S. a little bit higher starting position.
Jimmy, do you? I mean,
I didn't have Aronson in my list because I have him kind of listed as a winger, but I do appreciate him coming inside. I don't mind it.
No, and my whole thing is, and I appreciate this, Charlie, because I feel we've gotten comfortable with a midfield that is Weston McKennie has an X factor getting into the box. He can score goals on set pieces, late runs, things like that. But it's a pretty traditional midfield 3 in terms of it's a little bit more neutral than anything, right?
You know what? I'll say though,
they're not that connected.
I mean, they're not connectors. We actually don't have like an exquisite.
We cannot get our striker in. If there's one thing I could say from our striker issues is that I haven't been able to see one of our strikers in the last 12 months have connected play with our midfield to be able to go, oh, okay, yeah, they're not good. More often than not, it's a single chance or it's something like that. We go wide, they don't finish their chance. We go, oh, they got their chance, they didn't finish it. Oh, they finished it. Okay, give them another run. I haven't seen our top 3 because it's been a little bit more neutral and there's interchangeable play, and I think it's good. And I think Musah's great in there. And I think McKennie's great in there. But I agree with Charlie in the sense that we haven't found a way to connect them to the attack in a way that has a little bit more of a 10 or an 8.5 that's more attached to attached to the attack. They're more serviceable in a lot of ways. And I love Musah on the ball, and I love where McKennie plays, but I haven't seen. I guess it's been hard for me to judge a striker because they're rarely involved in any of our play other than like at the end of crosses where we do have the tools like a Gio Reyna when he's healthy or Brendan Aronson to actually connect those lines a little bit and at least have them floating a little bit more, take a little more onus on the attacking side versus defensive.
I'm trying to remember the play in Mexico City where who played the entry pass into Ricardo Pepi, and Pepi was the one that like released Timo Weah in behind, Weah crosses it
on the right side.
Yeah, and Pulisic has that one-on-one and doesn't do enough with it, and Memo Ochoa makes a good save. But I'm trying to remember that entry pass because I don't feel like we see that a lot. And I think that's where Ricardo Pepi is one of his biggest strengths. When he drops into that space, forces a center back to follow him, and that creates that passing lane that he did extremely well to unlock the defense and get Timo Weah in behind. But I don't feel like we see that consistently. And so as much as I love McKennie, Musah, and Adams for all the X factors that they bring, I don't feel like we have someone that can put their foot on the ball and really dictate the flow. Luca de la Torre might be the best that we have. I don't think Busio is up to the job, or not yet at least, or he doesn't do it consistently. I think we see it at times. But De La Torre might be the only one that really looking to get it, play it, move, just poke and prod.
Gio Reyna would be my favorite, though, to be honest.
Like, I think Luca's too much side to side.
Okay.
I don't think he's enough for it.
But he's still he could be an important piece based on how you play.
That's why I want him on that's why I want him on the field in June, because I want to see like a different opponent, different style. Luca De La Torre reminds me a lot of Mark McKenzie, who was like oddly picked by Gregg Berhalter for very specific types of moments in games. And you just go, I don't like, if I was Mark McKenzie, I'd be like, dude, I get all the crap away games that are scrappy and ugly. I don't get any of the like the fun stuff. Luca De La Torre, to me, I haven't seen the sample size enough to know, like, can he be versatile enough? Can he connect those lines, like you said, Charlie? Very side to side, very possession, very rhythmic. That's great. But again, we're still missing that. Okay, we can go side to side, no problem. Fullbacks
like
high
Paco
and wide.
Torres a little bit, where he did the same. I loved playing with Paco Torres because it gave us a little bit of something different. Sorry, Charlie, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, Paco Torres is a good one, but I want my midfielders making runs. I want my midfielders getting into the channels, getting in between the gaps, and not so much. If you look at Musah, McKinney, and Adams, they start so deep, and when they do get on the ball, there's a huge amount of space between them and the midfielder. They have to dribble, and they're looking at 1, 2, 3 midfielders or outside backs who come inside. It's not the most appealing way for an attacking midfielder to connect with your striker, as opposed to getting it on the run in behind the midfield or in between, so that you're looking at you're running at the backs, and then your center forward is saying, okay, I can move into this space on the half turn, and then all he has to do is slip me in. We're not seeing that. That's not happening. We're never seeing a midfielder released and he's bypassed the midfield, and now he's just looking at the back line and the center forward.
Unless we play with inverted wingers, because I think Aronson did that to great effect against Jamaica in Austin, if I remember correctly. We started inside out. That's true. I mean, they were more inside. No,
but the thing, also the thing is like, we're talking about playing against two different types of teams, right? Run a play. I go back to Honduras, up, back, through. We get back into the game that way with Ricardo Pepi. I talk about I gave the goal when we did our awards of, it was like 7-8 passes into the striker, back, lays it off, goes wide, cuts the ball in. Brendan Aronson scores. That in the run of play is great when we can find that entry pass into the striker. I don't think we do that. And then part two to that is when teams sit back against us, even worse. And that's why I think about, I don't know, is Brendan Aronson the right one? Because he can advance vertically, but a team sitting back, how do we get Gio Reyna in and around the ball? Because again, we create a lot of our chances in that combination play where it's moving 1 and 2 touch and it's sharp passing. But I just don't think that's Weston McKennie. Because I think Weston McKennie can get the ball, get it back, and then hit a nice switch. I think that's Yunus Musah can drive the ball forward. Tyler Adams can hit a nice long switch or connect side to side. But there's nobody that I've seen that has the comfort of driving in, getting it back from, like, controlling the flow of the game in higher and more dangerous positions on the field, or more high risk actually positions on the field, in terms of knowing when and where to attack and take that risk that could lead to a turnover or a counterattack.
But Gio Reyna would be that guy.
Yeah. Yes, of course. He's got the skill set to make that happen. Now, if everybody wants to join this conversation, if you're watching on YouTube, hit us up in the comments after you hit like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate that. If you're listening in podcast form and you're here listening to this late, then, or at another time or at your leisure, hit us up at ISWT Pod on Twitter with your starting 3 for these June games. Who do you want to see? McKinney might be back, but let's leave him out of the equation for right now. Do you want an Aronson in there? Do you want to see a little bit more of an active number 10 that's in and around, maybe a little higher up the field? Or do you like what we have in place now with kind of McKinney and Musah sitting back? Well, I think De La Torre is an interesting option as well, and he's done well with his minutes. But is that what we need to see to help us continue to drive the game against some of these opponents? Who did Aronson play? What game did Aronson play at the 10? He played in one and didn't do well. I thought it was El Salvador match 1. It could have been, but it was like, I was super like excited 10 guys. About that. Yeah, same. But they had like 10 guys on top of the box. Was it that game? Because I just remember it being like, I'm so excited because Charlie mentioned it. This is where he was best. Like, get the ball, turn and go, and connect the game a little bit, and just be a threat on one-on-one and combination play. Was it that game? Because I loved him in that, but in that game, I just remember being like, oh, maybe not at the national team level. Well, remember the game against Canada at home where he was the one that did the counter pressing off the throw in, won the ball. And I don't know if that's where his starting position was overall in the game, but at that moment he was central and he found himself in central moments. He played forward. to your point, with little in, back, and through, we got some combinations because we allowed something to develop. And I don't know if we do this enough as well. Because we created a little bit of that combination in the middle of the field, it allowed Anthony Robinson to bomb forward with real purpose. And then we had played a great ball into him. He hit it first time across. And in the central position, there was Brenden Aaronson who slotted it in. We didn't see that very often. And that was against one of the best defenses, most organized teams in all of CONCACAF World Cup qualifying. I'd love to see us do more of that. But it isn't easy, obviously. It's easy to say, hard to do at times. But are we even looking for it? I think it's a big conversation. So, again, if you want to join us, hit us up on Twitter, ISWTpod, or hit us up in the comments here on the YouTubes. All right, Heath, we haven't seen who your starters would be in June. I saw Charlie's was Musah, Adams, and Aaronson. Mine was Musah, Adams, and De La Torre. Where are you going for these June friendlies? What combination of players, assuming McKennie and Reyna aren't going to be available?
Yeah, mine was based on and I went with Luca De La Torre as well. I've liked him, but I'm not sold on him, right? I'm not sold on.
You want to see more of him. You want to see more.
I just want to see more of him. And I think, like, if I don't have Weston McKennie, which I want to continue to get those guys more games together, I do want Musah, because I was kind of torn between, well, we could find ourselves, just based on the health of this team, we could find ourselves with Acosta and Adams on the field together in a World Cup. So can we find a better way for them to find rhythm together, or be a little more complementary to each other? That was my initial thing. And then I was like, well, I'm kind of like, I've got my mind made up on what that's going to be. And it could be functional, but it's not going to be what I like. So can Luca De La Torre be something a little bit different? Can he provide something for this team? And that's why I wanted to see him more than anything in that midfield role of being challenged. Like Charlie said, he's very side to side. And I think that's great in good moments, right? If you're playing against possession-based teams where you need to be able to keep the ball, great. But part of being able to keep the ball isn't a square pass. It's being able to advance to the next lines, to break lines of pressure. Can he be that next guy? And I saw him at times in qualifying in his few games be able to get further into the attack and work the ball, again, side to side, but in higher positions. And I kind of like that. And so for me, it's just Luca De La Torre getting another chance to show kind of where he fits in against a different type of opponent, because I do feel Gregg's used him very specifically, and I want to see him a little bit more with less parameters that he's played under, to see if, like, can he be something different that we haven't seen before? Can he rise to the challenge? Similarly to what I wanted to see out of Busio early on, where I just didn't really see his ability to take some of that raw kind of undeveloped talent or potential that he has and turn it into something at the national team. I'd like to see that same thing for De La Torre, because he's been good, but I'm just curious, can he be great for this team? Like, can he be somebody that challenges for a starting spot or brings us something different where you go, okay, now this is where we use him?
Now, and I love that insight, because we're on the same page, and I do want to see more of De La Torre, maybe a little higher up the field. I think sometimes he does have a tendency, if he drops deep, then that forces our front three to have to drop a little deeper to maybe get the ball off of him. But if he can stay a little bit higher and stay higher off that shoulder, and maybe almost as our de facto 10, and maybe be a little bit more central, I'm curious as to what the flow would look like. But Charlie, this is what we want. This is what you want. That's what Heath wants. This is what I want. What do you think Gregg Berhalter wants out of this collection of midfielders? I think obviously that's the elephant in the room. I mean, what do you think Gregg wants to see when we play Morocco on June 1st and Uruguay on June 5th?
Versatility. I think he wants players who are going to be ball winning, who kind of boss the midfield, who can cover ground, who can connect passes. Tyler Adams, Weston McKennie, Yunus Musah all can keep possession, can all get forward. Yunus Musah and Weston McKennie are box to box. Tyler Adams can, but we needed him to be a little bit more disciplined and protect the back four, which he's done, I think, extraordinarily well. And he's only going to get better. I love the fact that he's now back in the lineup at Salzburg. At RB Leipzig. I think they've done everything from the transition standpoint and being able to cut out passes and win 50-50 challenges. I still think there needs to be a vast improvement in being a bridge from the midfield to the 9. That needs to improve. I think they also need to improve to make those late runs into the box. Weston McKennie's, that's been one of his strong points. But I think it's got to be other guys too. So whether it's Yunus Musah or Gio Reyna or Brenden Aaronson, the fact that Gio Reyna and Brenden Aaronson could come into that role, I think that just gives you as something different. And Gio Reyna is a player that's going to be a little bit more on the ball and creative ideas and trying flicks and using the outside of his foot and no look passes and combining. And, you know, he can take players 1v1 in short distance. So you love the fact that he can do that and give you something different. Brandon Aaronson's more playing off the shoulder, making runs. And the movement aspect, which is really tricky to track if you're a defender. So I think at this point, Gregg Berhalter just wants control of the game. And I think he feels comfortable with those three, Musah, McKennie, and Adams. But I think now we're evolving and saying, hey, without a 9 who's super dominant, like Hector Moreno was talking about Joe's Delta Store, we don't have a Josie or a Clint Dempsey or a Landon Donovan right now. So maybe you need a little bit more dynamism from your midfield.
No, it's interesting. I'm thinking about the game in Canada where we had McKennie, Musah, and Adams. We had Pulisic, Zardes, and Brendan Aronson starting in this one. We didn't have Timo Weah. No Walker Zimmerman available for these. I don't know how much that of a difference. It felt like Canada was up for that one and ready to go. But that game was a game we didn't. I remember Gregg coming out of that saying we had control, and he was pleased with the control that we had, but it didn't lead to anything. Heath Pierce, we weren't necessarily that dangerous. We got, I think McKennie had a header at the end of the first half that Mr. Sweats made a good save on at the end, Borjan, and that was basically it. Maybe Brendan Aronson had a good chance later in the second half, if I'm thinking about that game correctly, but we started to play with a little bit more urgency. But possession for possession's sake gets you somewhere, but doesn't always turn into anything meaningful. So I guess there's that balance that we have to find, and that's why we're trying to identify these three players that can help us really connect. As Charlie says, I mean, the transition game is where we can hurt people, but if we're not transitioning quick enough, we're not transitioning in a way that's going to suck somebody into the middle so we can create the space out wide, is a bit of an issue. And I feel like there's enough examples out there where you can stifle our attack, and I'm sure our opponents in the World Cup will be looking at those games very closely.
Yeah, the only thing that has held me back from being more critical of our national team is just the age, the youth, the inexperience that they have. But we're talking about Weston McKennie starts for the biggest team in Italy. We're talking about Tyler Adams, Europa League semifinals or quarterfinals. You've got played in Champions League. You know, tied for, or I guess the second most, you know, in terms of the furthest that he's gone and scored in Champions League semifinal, or was it a quarterfinal? Quarterfinal. Like, these guys are playing at big clubs. And I think the demand from Gregg needs to now be higher to say, I want to see you guys dominate games for longer periods. Like, I don't think it's good. Like, I think it's good enough to qualify what we did. And that's great because we all know how hard CONCACAF is. But there still has to be this longer, bigger picture of being like, we've got a lot of big players playing at big clubs right now. We need to dominate a little bit more and having the confidence. And that's what I've always liked, actually, about Timo Weah when he's kind of emerged in the last few months, of just having the confidence to put his foot on the ball and just go at people. And Serginho Dest, the thing that I've always liked about him is just when at the right time and when his confidence is good, just go at people. And when we do that, when we beat people one-on-one, we have this combination play where we know when we need to be one touch and two touch. We are so hard to play against, and it actually leads to a lot of goals for this national team when we've played with that sort of rhythm. But at times, it's just these long lulls of period where we kind of are okay with just giving the excuse of like fighting and discipline and being good at pressing, but then nothing comes of it, as you said, Jimmy. And I think going back to the Gregg Berhalter question from our midfielders, there needs to be a little bit more, and it goes back to Charlie saying Brendan Aronson there, a little bit more confidence or trust or responsibility or accountability put onto our midfielders to create more for our attack, as opposed to just being really good at putting out fires or really good at pressing in good spots or really good. Okay, great. We're very good at that. How do we add more elements to our game now that make us more dangerous when we do win the ball? Or what do we do when we win the ball in good spots or press high up the field? I think is a really important sort of next step. Again, it's not a club team. So you can't go out to the training pitch every day for 2 hours and work on the next elements or sort of the evolution of where do we go from here? Okay, established baseline here. How do we go? So it's going to be a challenge, but I do think we need to start demanding more from these players, not because it's the national team, but because they have the quality to do more.
Mm-hmm. You know, I'll be honest, before we started this podcast, I'm like, do we have enough here to talk a full podcast about our midfield? And now that we've talked about it and getting to some great discussions with both of you and some great questions from our community, I feel like I could go another couple hours on this, but we're going to stop it right here. We're going to take our first and only break of the show. And when we come back, we got some comments from some former English internationals that I don't think are going to make you too happy. They're taking some digs at the U.S. team and their chances in the World Cup. So don't go anywhere.
Look, we want to make a movie. Paramount is going to come crashing down. We need hits.
I got no cast, no Pacino. Brando.
He's a nutcase.
Can one thing go right with this picture? This movie makes my people look like animals, and that ain't gonna happen.
I'm not running.
Welcome back to In Soccer We Trust. I'm Jimmy Conrad alongside Charlie Davis and Heath Pierce. We just had a scintillating conversation about our midfield. We'll continue that as these episodes move forward and as we start to preview these big friendlies and, of course, the Nations League games against El Salvador and Grenada. So don't be scared. We'll get back to it, or don't be worried. Now let's talk about the English, because I had the opportunity to discuss with Lucho Garcia and Ian Joy and Poppy Miller, Inter Miami's manager, Phil Neville, and former England international, about the U.S.'s chances against England. Here's my question, and here's your answer, and I look forward to seeing what you two think about this. Check it out. Second, put on the international one. I just want to know what excuses you're going to have once the U.S. beats England in the World Cup in November, December.
Well, do you know, I honestly, two things. I really think that England can win the World Cup. I think with the World Cup being in November, December, I think it gives us a massive, massive advantage that we've never had. That off the back of a hard Premier League season, playing 50, 60 games, we're going to at least have a team that's going into a World Cup that's fresh after only playing three months of the season. So that's an excuse that we can't use at the next World Cup. Gareth Southgate has done an incredible job. I honestly think he's one of the best England managers of all time behind Sir Alf Ramsey. And I think we've got a group of players that can really, really believe, or they do really believe, that they can go on and win a World Cup. And being in America for the last 14 months, I see an incredible talent in this country, incredible talent that probably 10 years ago that I didn't see. I think there's a different type of player coming through. You see that with the sprinkling of players around Europe now. They've got a brilliant manager in Gregg, I really do think. And I think not this World Cup might be too soon, but in the 2026 World Cup with the young players that are coming through the system, I think America could challenge for a semi-final place in 2026, if not beyond. I really do. I think there's so much talent in this country.
So shout out first and foremost to CBS Sports HQ. If you guys want to find that, I'm on there quite a bit. Heath is on there. Charlie does the Paramount Plus stuff. But if you go to Paramount Plus and find the live tab, it'll have a drop down that says CBS Sports HQ. You can find some great stuff.
Yeah, click away from Paramount Plus and join the boys. You know,
that's right. Come hang out with us.
You're real friends on HQ.
But incredible insight there from Phil Neville, where first of all, he went on to say that he thinks England can win the World Cup. And as we've discussed before, semifinals in the last World Cup, final of the Euros, I guess the natural evolution is for them to actually win it. Charlie, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think about Phil's comments and his belief, now that he's had a taste of what American soccer is all about, of our potential? And I, in some ways, agree with him that we've said it before, we're planting the seeds of 2022 so we can have a tremendous run in 26.
That was always the plan. You don't go from not qualifying for the World Cup and then completely revamping the player pool with an average age of 23 years old and think you're going to win the World Cup. That doesn't work. The whole plan was, let's get this talented youth that we have. We're going to kind of move aside from the older generation. And typically, in a national team, you have like 5, 6, 7 players who have played at least one World Cup. That's not the case now. And so that was the direction Gregg Berhalter and U.S. Soccer wanted to go in. Great. That's the understanding. We get it. I think for 2026, if you've given all these players, these studs who have, really started to show what they're capable of in Europe, which is really impressive, and in Major League Soccer, that I think it's going to give us a lot of hope. The hope, though, ultimately is that they do progress out of the group in 2022. Then we can be talking about us winning the World Cup in 2026. The England team, yes, everyone knows they can win the World Cup. if you're competing for the Euros, then you're good enough to win the World Cup. That's how difficult the Euro tournament is. So ultimately, you got to come and bring it every game, and luck plays into it. So it's not as easy as it is. If you have all the talent on paper and on the pitch, it doesn't always work that way. We know that. So I think for us, all the U.S. players playing, you have nothing to lose. Everything in the game, it's all in front of you. And when we talk about teams sitting in, who's going to sit in against the U.S. in the World Cup? Everyone thinks they can beat the U.S. Oh, they're 23 years old. They're going to be coming, which plays right into our hands. Just be smart, be pragmatic, and then when you have the opportunity, finish, which we haven't done in CONCACAF World Cup qualifying. But I think this team
we're saving it. We're saving it for the World Cup, Charlie. That's the silver lining. So Heath, one thing that I thought was interesting with Phil's answer, and I hadn't taken this into consideration until he said it, was the fact that he thought the players could be fresh actually for the first time in a World Cup because they're not on the back end of a 50, 60, 70 game season. What are your thoughts on that particular perspective? Because MLS players, the ones that make the roster or the ones that make rosters for other countries, will be coming off of a long, arduous season.
Well, most countries will be in that situation, especially in Europe. Obviously, you go into the Americas and you have completely different league structures and timings, from Brazil playing sort of the regional league to their actual league play. Argentina similarly going through kind of constant changes. But for me, it's still, you're going to have a condensed summer, that goes into that. So it's going to be shortened because you got to make up for time in the World Cup. So there's going to be a busy schedule. We've seen for the last couple of years, pandemic related, how much gets jammed into these schedules now across the board. So I do think it's a better advantage than sort of the fatigue that goes into a summer before. To be honest with you, Jimmy, when you teed it up as like us not being very happy with what he said, I was viciously looking for stuff on the internet while he was talking, waiting for him to have some shots fired at us.
It's coming. It's the Jamie Carragher and Micah Richards that's gonna.
Oh, don't worry. Well, we've got plenty to say back to anybody that's going to be criticized from the sidelines of England's performances in last generations. But no, overall, I agree with Charlie in the sense that 2026 is the long-term goal. To do that, if you look at any sort of, and I don't think we're in a golden generation. I think the next generation is going to be far better than this group that we have. And I think we're going to see now. Well, I just think we're going to see a new standard, and that standard will have a golden generation at some point. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think that we're there yet. But 2026 being the goal. And by the way, England didn't qualify in '94, the last time that we hosted a men's World Cup.
Nice.
But it is worth noting that this is part of a longer project, and I don't want to put too much pressure. I think we should set lofty goals, and I think getting out of the group stage is a great point. But England, same thing. They get quarterfinals 2 of the last 4, round of 16, one of those ones, out in the group stages of like the last 5 one time, that sort of thing. So there is a building blocks. It just doesn't come overnight. And so I agree that it's about 2026, but I don't want that to be this crutch that allows us to get out of not putting together solid performances, not knowing how to navigate a group stage in a World Cup, and challenging ourselves against a diverse group of opponents, and in what I think is a group that we can realistically get out of, and England being a team that we can realistically get, quote unquote, a result against.
Okay, well, I guess I was kind of teasing some more clickbait. It wasn't really with the Phil Neville interview, but it is with these statements that I saw. I was watching it post-game, Champions League, Thierry Henry, Kate Abdo, Jamie Carragher, Micah Richards, and I was like, are these guys are taking the piss. Take a look at this.
25th of November, 2022, England versus the USA.
Oh, my word.
Predict the score.
2-0 England.
3-0 England.
1-1?
1-1.
Yes, Thierry.
Oh, trying to keep his happy.
Let's go, Thierry.
Trying to get a new contract.
Yeah. That's actually what I think. 1-1.
No chance.
Thierry.
So Jamie Carragher says no chance, but Heath, I'll come to you first on this. That I know they were put on the spot and they had to throw it out there. Micah Richards, very, very confident in that. Jamie Carragher, the 3-0, the no chance at the end, pretty disrespectful. And I hope we can get him on the show at some point and we can use this clip against him because I think he's going to eat his words. But Thierry Henry, New York Red Bulls, he's played in MLS, he's coached in MLS, he knows the system, he knows the players. I think being very unemotional and kind of seeing it for what it is, 1-1. Who do you think's right out of this conversation? Micah Richards, I mean, 2-0. It could be 2-0. Who knows?
I think it'll be a tight game. I don't think it'll be a 2-0. Could the U.S. lose 1-0? Sure. Do I think it could be a 1-1? I do believe that. I think we are drinking our own Kool-Aid often. If you think about,
well, so are they apparently.
Oh, for sure. But like they've also got some results to show that
they're bathing. They're bathing in their Kool-Aid.
But they always have, and they've tremendously underperformed over the generations of national team. But this is a new national team. It's a new era in England with a young squad that's cut their teeth in the Euros, that cut their teeth in the last World Cup. Both of them extremely successful runs in the grand scheme of things. And so there's naturally a belief of, same with what you would call the golden generation of Belgium, of like constantly being ranked 1, 2, 3, 4 in the world. Like they should win. They haven't. And so it's a challenge, but I'm talking about winning the tournament. But against the US, if you think about it in the context of what they're looking at, they don't see the US any different than they would see a Wales or a Scotland in terms of, hey, we've got some players playing at these clubs and you have these other players playing at these clubs and you have like tier 1A Champions League. You've got some non-Champions League tier 1 players. You've got some, championship level players. And I think that's the way that they see us. We see it differently because we're in the thick of it. So, while
but there was something that said, Heath, though, where even though we might not have had those tiered players, when you talk with ex-foreign players, ex-foreign internationals, and we've all had that opportunity, they always admired our team spirit and our togetherness and that kind of those intangibles that maybe they didn't have because they just maybe they had too many big names that they didn't want to share the ball. There was too much, in intra-team politics or whatever you want to say. Are we evolving into that? I mean, is that where we want to go? Obviously, we want our players playing at the highest competitions, but do you think we would lose some of that identity that we've been known for, or do you feel like we need to evolve from that anyway?
No, I mean, by the way, I think we're going to evolve from that with time because talent is going to eventually win that over. I do think that there is still this missing piece because of just how big our country is, the styles of play and everything of like fitting into a system. Now, England, I think, also suffers from that same style, but most other countries in Europe have a system or style that is culturally part of their identity. But I don't think we'll lose that because I think we'll tap back into that. The thing about CONCACAF World Cup qualifying is that it does test you in a number of ways that you as a player think egotistically that going down to Honduras, there's no way it can test me in a way that I haven't been tested, right? I play at Juventus. And then you get punched in the face and you go, okay, this is different. You feel this momentum swing that you've never felt in your life before that's based on a number of factors you can't control. You learn from all that type of stuff. I think we will be very hard to play against with England. Do I think they'll control probably the flow of the play and have the better of possession and probably the better of chances? Sure. But I would have expected that down in Mexico, and we could have gotten out of that way with the result. It's going to have to be a day where we're playing at 8, 9s, and 10s across the board for our national team. But there's no reason that we can't get a result against England. And it wouldn't be something you make a movie out of. It's about the team being talented and the team also executing a game plan that can beat England.
Okay, Charlie, I want you to answer each person directly. So Micah says 2-0. What do you say to Micah?
I would say that's the obvious guess for a former England international.
Captain Obvious answer, Micah Richards.
Yeah, it's like, you really went on a limb there.
And then Jamie Carragher, he's the most arrogant of the bench. He says 3-0, says no chance. What do you say to him?
Well, arrogance is definitely what comes to mind because 2-0, you could say, yeah, you're right. No one's going to disagree with you. Even, it's a World Cup. It's the games are a lot harder, and they should have learned in 2010 because if you look at those comparisons then, which were, I think, even more drastic, they looked at, okay, who are the starters for the U.S. men's national team? Okay, Josie Altidore. They'd say a flop in the Prem that couldn't handle it. So already you have that. Then Clint Dempsey, they say, oh yeah, playing at Fulham, like not Chelsea, not Liverpool. And you're looking at some of the players that they had at the time, Frank Lampard, Wayne Rooney, John Terry, Steven Gerrard, Ashley Cole. These are all legends in the Prem. Stu Holden, again, Bolton, J. Demerritt, Watford. For them, they look at it on paper, English players and supporters, and they say, these guys couldn't even couldn't even play for Everton or a mid-table team. So how
game's not played on paper, baby.
That's right.
Exactly. But that's the thought when they're trying to compare. But going into the match, they say, where does that person play and how many minutes is he getting? And the easy one for England right now is Christian Pulisic. He scored, and then against Manchester United, he's coming off the bench, right? So we're talking about Christian Pulisic should be playing, he's scoring big goals, and he's coming off the bench still. So I think that answers the question when we say, should Christian stay at Chelsea and keep fighting and fighting? No, he needs to go somewhere where he's going to play every game and get the respect he deserves and still be pushed with competition. But to me, it seems they don't rely on him.
Okay, so what do you say to Thierry Henry? I'd give him a nice firm handshake saying thank you very much for your 1-1 prediction.
I think
what do you say to Thierry then?
I'd say the U.S., if they get a 1-1 result against England, they played a phenomenal game, a fantastic game.
He clearly has some belief in our squad, though, which is cool.
He should. If everyone's playing at their best, especially in midfield, I think it'll go really well. And obviously the goalkeeper position has to get sorted.
Yeah, you got to make some saves.
So he's got to go on loan somewhere. I think Matt Turner's staying regardless at Arsenal, so he's going to be in the same position that Zach's in right now. So I think for Zach, it's getting to the right club, whether it's staying in the Prem or going to the Bundesliga where he had success there and playing 90 minutes every game, because Gregg's already said that's my one, because he can play the best with his feet. So in that case, 1-1 is a great result for the U.S. And I think Thierry's thinking, hey, this U.S. is going to be a little bit more defensive and reserved, and this could play right into their hands.
Okay,
Jimmy, what's your take? What's your take on the 3? Because the 1-1 sounds it's got nothing to do with the players you put on the field. It's got nothing to do with the style of play. Getting a 1-1, you can play as. I mean, we saw it when Atletico Madrid played and they were like, this is the first time I've ever seen a 5-5 formation. And not that the U.S. would do that, but there's ways in which you can play to a 1-1 that, again, you go back to the England 2010.
Well, yeah, you can.
No one remembers who played how.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, that's extraordinary circumstances, but nobody remembers how you get the 1-1, right? The U.S. is going to come out looking to get a result in some way and disrupt the game. They're not going to go out and be like, well, how do we beat England and dominate the game? That's not going to be the approach.
No. It shouldn't be the approach. I do at times, and I'm going to give you a story, and then I'm going to give you a big question that I want not only you two to answer, but people watching on YouTube or listening. Hit us up at ISWT Pod on Twitter if you're listening to this in podcast form. So, and this is going to kind of answer my question because it ties into how I'd like to see us play. Micah Richards, whatever. He played it safe 2-0. I wish he'd given us a goal. 2-1, I'd be like, all right. But 3-0, the arrogance from another JC that played center back with his heart on his sleeve. That's me, and it's Jamie Carragher. I mean, I didn't.
By the way, a 2-0 is like basically calling it a draw. That's a fearful 2-0 to call it 2-0. This is
it's like they score one and then maybe they could have
won the Euros, could have won the World Cup, and you're just talking about a 2-0 against this young U.S. side that has nothing. Like, come on.
I don't know. I'm trying to decide if Henry was being a contrarian or if he really truly believed. I think he does. I think there's an element of belief in what we're capable of, and I know that he knows the player pool better than those other two guys. So I'm going to lean a little bit more towards Thierry, and I know my bias is showing. I'm drinking our Kool-Aid, but what do you want? We have a podcast called In Soccer We Trust. Of course, we're going to side with our guys. Now, my story time was back in 2013 was the 100-year anniversary of U.S. soccer, and they had a big celebration in New York, and Jurgen Klinsmann was going to do a roundtable with then President Sunil Gulati in the MLS offices, and Grant Wall was there and all the top journalists around and blah, blah, blah. And I'm in there and I'm looking like an idiot because I'm doing some stuff for Kick TV. And I had one question and
Charlie, well, hold on, Jimmy, before you get to the question, Charlie, do you remember how Jimmy back in 2013, would wear like the wigs and like go full costume with like his tuxedo and like, it was an era.
Yeah. It was an era and definitely an element of fun. So ultimately what I did was I shot like my stuff in studio and threw it over to my correspondent, and the correspondent was me. So I threw it to myself and I was all dressed up and all American gear. And I wore that into this press conference or whatever, this round table with Jurgen and Sunil. And I waited. They waited to pick on me. And I know that Michael Cameraman and Neil Beathy at US Soccer were super reluctant to call on me, but they call on me and I say, hey, Jurgen, I got one question for you. And this is ahead of, we've already qualified for the World Cup. So this is ahead of Brazil in 2014. It's a would you rather. Would you rather play really, really well in Brazil in the group of death and really, I mean, well enough where everybody's like, oh shit, US has figured it out. They're starting to play like they're evolving. They're starting to play a style that we should be scared of. And in future iterations of the World Cup, they're going to be a threat. But we don't qualify for the knockout rounds. Or would you rather play poorly but then get through and get to the round of 16? And I said play to our stereotypes where we sit back and absorb and try to score on set pieces. And I was like, he had talked about all this vertical integration and all whatever the jargon he was using at the time. I assumed he would have gone with the first one, like playing really well, but not getting through, being a little unlucky, as opposed to the opposite of all that. And honestly, Sunil Gulati sitting right next to him, and Sunil Gulati is frothing at the mouth to answer for him. I mean, he is like, he physically, he's like a physical reaction to my question. And he was a total jerk to me in the elevator on the way back down. He was hot. But and I'll save that story for another time. But Jurgen picked the second one, that he'd rather get through. And that's exactly, and not saying it exactly went that way, but we did absorb. We did almost play a lot to our stereotypes, but we did enough and made some key plays to get us into the next round. And then we gave up more shots in a World Cup game in history against Belgium than any other team. So I kind of feel the same way when I'm setting this up to play against England or any of the teams we play. There's a part of me, maybe this is super naive and idealistic, but I would love for us to just play on the front foot and not just go out and play against England and just sit back and absorb the whole time. Now, I think there's an element of that game where we are going to have to suffer for sure, but I don't want it to be for 40 out of the 45 minutes of each half.
I don't think it's going to be that way.
Okay, good. Go ahead, Charlie. Take it away. I mean, what do you want to see?
Do you think it's mostly played in the middle third of the field? Like, do you think it's end to end, Charlie? Do you think it's mostly this whole like kind of unsettled game where we're kind of, it's a little cagey? Or
I see us really frustrating them, and that's due to Weston and Tyler and whether it's Gio Reyna or Musah being in the midfield and just whether it's the transition game and keeping it around the middle third. I just don't see our young players just sitting back. That's just not in their DNA. Now, I do think they won't run or make kind of those aimless runs where they're just running forward and being super aggressive. I don't see that happening. I don't see Serginho Dest just bombing forward every time. But I do see us winning the ball and going and trying to play. If you watch the Azteca game is one of the ones that comes to mind. Is you expected us to backs against the wall, we trying to qualify, just defend, and that we took the game to them. We were the better team. We outpossessed the Mexicans. We were, for me, I think for all of us, we watched, we said, whoa, that was impressive, because that was not the performance we all thought we were going to get. So I think that's kind of the outlook for me coming into the World Cup is this is going to be the same thing against England.
Okay, so Charlie, and I will say very quickly that I like that England's our second game because we'll have kind of a 90 minutes to kind of get out any nerves or whatever. And obviously we'll have a result to work against. Hopefully it's a positive one. So we maybe takes a little pressure off that second one. But Charlie, for you, what would you rather see in this group? Play really, really well and not get through, or kind of play like shit and do just enough to get to the round of 16?
Get through. At the end of the day, get through. But teams
because they had to figure it out, right? They got to be tough, mentally tough. Okay.
Yeah, because you still have to work. Things still have to go your way, and you're still going to learn a lot. You can always adjust your play. How many times have we played against teams where they're all focused on keeping the ball and you win the game? You're not thinking, oh, we played ugly. We had to fight and we got through. Who gives a hell? Who gives anything about playing well but losing? You always want to win, and you always want to progress.
No, that's fair. I get it, and I respect it. I respect it. I mean, in 2006, we didn't get through the group. We didn't necessarily play aesthetically pleasing either, but it would have been pretty cool because we would have played Brazil in the next round, which would have been a big thrill for all of us players. Now, Heath, what about you? What would you rather? Are you with Jurgen Klinsmann and Charlie here that you'd rather just grind it out and get through, or do you feel like there's some value into us actually laying some groundwork that we are going to be a force to be reckoned with in the future?
I think that groundwork's being laid by the talent that we're developing. And I don't think it's necessarily the national team's responsibility to just implement it. That was always my issue with Jurgen in the early days, which was like, you can't just culturally come in and just change things, right? Now, I actually agree with a lot of the work that Jurgen did on a developmental level that no one ever got to see, which was forcing the hand of development in a lot of ways that we're going to see the benefits of longer term. But that's, again, like, go back to the Germany failures. It was a decade of development that had regional training centers and all these things that you then see the fruition of way later on. So I think getting through is the thing that you can do, and you're going to see that incremental growth, or maybe you're not even going to see the incremental changes between Jimmy 2006 and 2022 in Qatar. But I think I think you will see that just basically in the quality and the talent and the maturity of the players, and the fact that we're putting out a really young team that's competing in a World Cup that's going to do hopefully incrementally better than we've seen before. And so I do think getting through the group is the most important thing, or getting out of the group, as opposed to implementing a style of play. The hard part that I always go back to with that is it's really hard in CONCACAF to do that, right? It's really hard in CONCACAF qualifying to implement that style of play from the start and say, well, let's take it to them. Let's go down to Honduras and take it to them. No, we saw that for a half after we were down 1-0 in Honduras. But when we go back to games aren't won on paper. On paper, we should, no disrespect to CONCACAF opponents, but we should probably batter most of our Central American opponents at the moment. But we don't. We fight, we scrap, we lose, we win, we draw. It's hard. And so it's hard to now go to a World Cup with a different type of opponent and then just say, let's do it a little bit differently. So of course. I think it's just about getting out. And I don't know if we'll ever get to a point in World Cup qualifying where it's any different than what we experience now, no matter how good our players are, just because there's a lot of uncontrollables in terms of the style of play and, things that we discuss all the time. So yeah, get out of the group stages. I think that builds the confidence for the future, and less so, again, you look back on the results, you won't look back on the way in which we got results.
No, and I think that's right, especially if we can get another World Cup game of experience. And as a group, these core players are going to be 27, 28 in 2026. So for them to know how to manage how to get out of a group, I think is super important as well. We talk about in-game management, but we also have to talk about in-group management. How do you have the wherewithal to survive a group, to make sure that you can book your ticket? Because once you get to the knockout rounds, anything can happen. All right, everybody, that is the end of In Soccer We Trust. Another fantastic episode. We appreciate everybody being a part of this community. Let's maintain all of the growth that we're having. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. We really appreciate your support. So on behalf of producer Alex and Charlie Davis and Heath Pierce, I'm Jimmy Conrad saying thank you for listening to In Soccer We Trust. And we'll see you again next Monday with another scintillating episode. And we're going to have another special guest next week as well. It should be a lot of fun. See you later.